And we're back. This is the splots and site templates session. And we'll also actually seamlessly lead into us taking the last Q&A of the day and wrapping up day one of Domains 101. Um, so I wanted to tell a little story about something you may or may not have heard about called SPLOTs. It's a terrible acronym, kind of like DOOO, right? And actually, it was the idea, I think, for Splots was born out of a conversation between Brian Lamb and Alan Levine at Thompson Rivers University in Canada. So it's another thing like the MOOC that came from Canada. And one of the things that's interesting about the SPLOT and the kind of philosophy behind the SPLOT, as I understand it, I don't know what the acronym actually stands for. And if you're looking at that site there, you see it keeps constantly changes to a different acronym, which I think is funny. But the thing about the SPLOT was for a lot of folks at TRU, and Brian Lamb saw this as an issue, they would install WordPress, they'd be faced with Hello World, and they wouldn't know what to do. Right? It would kind of be like all the options, all the possibilities were paralyzing. And so they kind of would be like, oh, WordPress is too complicated, or they would do the Hello World and run. So they were like, is there a way where when someone installs a WordPress instance, some of the work is there to guide them to basically have more than just a blank canvas, but the beginnings of an application or a site that's fully functional? And so out of this kind of discussion was born some of the early splots. And so I'm going to go and show you the sites here, and you can see them, that there's a bunch of different splots that might be of interest. There's one of my favorite is called the True Collector. Now, I'm not sure you all can see the True Collector there, but the True Collector is an interesting splot. It's a WordPress site that Alan Levine has programmed using custom programming to basically allow folks to add something to a collection. And he has a great write-up of it and a bunch of examples, and you can find this all at splot.ca. But I'm going to show you one that I think is pretty cool, and maybe you'll feel the same way, maybe not. But let me find this. Well, we didn't do it this time. But let me go here and find the Tech Collect. So this is University of Colorado at Boulder is using a Splot to allow people to share an image and some descriptions of a particular technology, like, for example, WordPress. There's the thing there. You can rate this technology. You can add details. And the nice thing about a Splot is anyone can do it. The site is set up so that if I click this collect button, I can go in there, I can title it and say reclaim hosting. This is, self-aggrandizing Jim Groom right here. And then I can put an image in of it. I could write an alt text for the image. I could say who I am. I could put a description in of the technology. I could link to that technology or give myself credit. Choose, oh wow, DOO is already selected, but choose a different category and then check and review. So someone will get this submission, review it, and they say, oh, this is a great addition to our collection. And I really like these sites that are allowing people to contribute and collect instances on the fly. I think another great example of this, and I'm going to show this with TRU Writer, which is a similar tool, but this is more focused around particular writing examples. And one that I really found compelling was OER in other languages. So Tanis Morgan, who's working out of British Columbia, writes or created a Splot and was asking people to submit OERs that aren't in English or in various languages besides English. And so you have this tool here to submit all of that information for this kind of site. So this site can become a database of tools of OERs in other languages quite seamlessly. No one has to know how to log into WordPress. No one needs to even put their identity. It can be anonymous, but it can be reviewed and kept safe. So these tools are pretty powerful for being very simple. All of this is up and running. You just customize it with your text, and you have basically a tool that can highlight collections, can highlight writing resources. A lot of people use TRU Writer for basically like a literary magazine, and it has some really powerful uses. Probably not the best use, but a personal one when I was trying to actually explore this is I'm sometimes on the radio sharing broadcasts, and I have no place I can put those broadcasts. But using the TRU collector, I can just create a simple database of different posts with the images of the album or whatever music I was playing, the recording of that session, and the description of when and where. And I have a kind of database of my radio shows throughout the pandemic that lasted for, a couple of years. And I found this a very interesting tool. And I imagine based on your usage, you would also, have a faculty or a staff or some other student who might find a tool like this useful. So this is a good example of a SPLOT. 3 other SPLOT tools that actually have one-click installers in WordPress are, and I actually might be able to just jump in there. So let me go to State U real quickly. And I'm going to show you this. And Lauren, in a couple of seconds, is probably going to jump in, or even a couple of minutes, and show you this in more detail. But I just want to show you that when you go into your WordPress or your cPanel and you look at all applications here, one of the things you'll quickly realize is those featured applications, several of them have SPLOTs. So these are one-click installers of TRU Collector, TRU Writer, and then these 3 SPLOTs, which are pretty cool. They're basically predefined or templated, and Lauren will talk more about this, portfolio sites where people can create their own portfolio very quickly in a template predefined in WordPress. That's the good of it. It also could be the bad of it, given a lot of it is predefined and you might want more freedom, which means you can always change the themes and plugins and get out of that template. But I do think these SPLOT tools are really good starter possible sites for folks who just want to get up and running, who want a really quick kind of introduction, but don't want to spend too much time really digging in on WordPress. These could potentially be valuable. I love playing with them. I think they're nice. Alan Levine does a ton of work and deserves a ton of credit supporting them, also keeping them up to date. They are their own installers. Like once you install them, you've installed the SPLOT. You haven't installed WordPress per se. It's a separate installer. But they are quite elegant, and he does a great job of keeping them up and running. So that's a kind of insight at SPLOTs. I'm going to let Lauren now show you actually how to run the SPLOTs, how to install them, and then also how to look at templates and talk about what they are versus SPLOTs. So Lauren, over to you.
Great. And while you were talking, I actually just transitioned to Mind Screen Share on the same window. So hopefully we'll make that as seamless as we can. So while Jim talked about SPLOTs, which are truly custom application installers for these templates, and you can see them right there, we have kind of a DIY version of that called site templates. And it's very similar concepts, right? Because really these SPLOTs are essentially, it's not an empty application install that says hello world. It's pre-generated themes and plugins with dummy content, so you can really understand the potential of what these themes have to offer. And each of these SPLOTs does have, an end goal in mind. So a writing intensive SPLOT or a collector SPLOT, as Jim mentioned, you can create your own. So if you want to create something that's, does something else, maybe for a photography course, or a great example that I heard a while back was, a biology course. I think they needed a way to publish their research in a private way. So they created a password protected site template because the students at the time weren't necessarily concerned with the site design. They just needed a place to get up and running and publish their content as quick as possible. So, you might have your own reasons to create a site template. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. Okay, so from the same cPanel page, I'm going to go back to my applications, and we're going to use the same application installer from earlier today. It's ilovedomains.stateu.org, and I've named it Workshop Site Template. So let's say I'm an admin. I spent some time configuring this site. I installed some plugins and themes, and I wanted to make this version of the application available for anyone else to install on the server. Or this version of the site. So pretend that I've put a lot of time and work into getting this ready to go to be templated. I'm now going to hop over to the server. So we're in WHM. I've searched Installatron Applications Installer in the search bar, and I have searched for this particular application. And you can see if I hover over some of these options, there's a star icon here that says template. So that's what we want to click. I'm going to name this Workshop Site Template. So let's say I've made a site for someone to run their own workshop, so we'll call it that. And maybe this is for, I don't know, Course 101. So, we want to kind of give it a little bit of a description, or could be for X, Y, and Z, whatever you want that to be. We're going to click template. So you can see it's basically taking a copy. It's copying the database and files, directories. It's doing all of that. It's truly capturing a snapshot of the site. So that's worth noting. After this is done templating, if I go back and make changes to this original install, those are not going to come over in the templated version. It is truly a snapshot. So it's very easy to re-template sites. You can see that this has already been complete. So I am now going to pop back in to my cPanel account here as an end user. And let's say I want to go and I want to install this site template. So I'm going to go back to WordPress because it's a template from the application. That's how cPanel handles these. I'm going to click install this application. And let's say I'm going to set this at workshop/workshop, right? If we scroll down here, I now have the option, give me a clean WordPress install. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger. Lauren's template, a previous one. And now I've got that workshop site template available right there. So that's how easy it is to create your own site template. And then, of course, I would scroll down and click install at the very bottom. And that's how I would install someone else's site template. I do recommend, if this is something that you want to do and you want to manage multiple site templates, I recommend creating a separate cPanel account specifically designated for site templates. That way, when you're going through and archiving sites later on down the road, you can always uncheck this box for the cPanel account that's managing other things. So I find that that's helpful, or you could put it in the main cPanel account for domain of one's own. I just like this, having them defined or designated to a certain location and organized there is probably best. So if I wanted to make changes to this template or see the other templates that I have, that can also be done at the server level too. So we're actually going to go into Installatron settings. And we looked at this earlier under access control. That's obviously where you would go to see all of your application installers. Where we're going is to templates, a little lower down. And let me see. Yeah, my window is blocking it. There we go. We're going to the templates section. And Installatron templates are categorized by the application being templated. So you can see there's a few here, but if I scroll down to WordPress, you will see those application templates that I have created. So I could go through, for instance, and untemplate it and says, are you sure? Sure. I don't know if untemplate is a word, but we're going with it. And so that's
remove template.
There you go, remove. That's probably better.
To be fair, my spell check always yells at me when I say deprovision. But we've said that more than once today.
Exactly. So that's as easy as it's very simple to do this. I have also written documentation for this as well. So know that this is available and something that we are happy to share. The other thing I will note here too, just while we're going, is that, just kind of, I guess, sitting for a minute on, well, what if I wanted my template to look like one of these. I want it to be featured and separated. I don't want it to kind of be hidden in the umbrella of another application. This is much more manual. This does require a lot more work to create a separate application installer. And then from there, you have to keep it updated. So it's a different sort of relationship, not only to offer it, but then to maintain and keep it around. So if that's something that you wanted to do, we do have instructions and a space where that's an option. You can create a custom application installer. You can work with our infrastructure team to write and build your own application installer, either for Installatron, where we just were, or for Reclaim Cloud. So both of those are an option for you. It's just a little more advanced, a little more involved. So not something that we can just say, sure, any site template that you want to create, let's just make an installer. It's a bit more complicated than that. So this template is it's a nice middle ground for us to be able to say, okay, if you want to provide, an entry point for your users to get up and running and to not be, I don't know, deer in the headlights with the hello world. Like sometimes that's the hardest part, is just knowing where to start. And I feel like with site templates, if you can see the demo content there and you can see the potential of the themes, you're really pushing the thinking forward for beginner users in a way, because you're, instead of saying what plugins do I use or what themes do I use, you're suddenly thinking, how do I change that text right there? And I want to change that color to something else. And then you're already in customizations or thinking about plugins in a different way. And so I find that site templates are quite useful. In fact, this is probably one of my favorite parts of Domain of One's Own. So I hope this makes sense. If there are any questions in Discord or, I'd love to hear them. I think we're actually going to have a little bit of time tomorrow morning just to show more examples. And if I do encourage you to play around with this and maybe, think of ways that this might be useful for you and your Domain of One's Own community. And if between now and tomorrow morning, you kind of are able to start a rough draft for your own site template or something, we will have an impromptu show and tell time tomorrow, and it would be awesome to see those. So anyway.
And it's interesting too. I mean, that was very useful. And I think one of the things that's worth talking about with splots versus templates, and I don't mean to put them at odds to each other, but the differences are splots, like Lauren pointed out, are kind of full-blown applications built on top of WordPress, but like they're using plugins and themes, and Alan has done a lot of custom coding to make it all work. So it kind of stands alone as its own entity. Whereas the template is something that, say 50 students who are going to have a particular class need X amount of plugins and X amount and a theme, and you want to save the faculty and yourself time with some of that troubleshooting. You're like, okay, here's the Nursing 101 template for all those students who will be recording X amount. Exactly. And that's done. Exactly. And it maybe isn't something that it's abstractable or you need to like put in GitHub and make a full-blown application, but it's super useful for you on the fly to get it done. That's where templates are super powerful and fairly easy to make at Installatron, as you pointed out.
Yeah. So, and while you were talking here, Jim, I was just kind of working behind the scenes because, I always use WordPress as the example just because it is so popular. So many people kind of gravitate towards WordPress because it's a comfort zone, but you can do this with other applications too. So if you have an Omeka archive with a lot of things already configured, or again, demo content that's already in there to help beginners make sense of some of this, you can do that for other applications. So I just installed a site called Omeka Template, and it's at ilovedomains.stateu.org/template. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to head right back into applications here and search for that. And I'm wondering if the spacing is throwing things off. There we go. So same way, I could take this, star it.
Yeah.
Omeka template. So we're doing it again here. I'm mostly just filling time to see if there are any questions. So if you have them, please let us know.
But this is nice too with Omeka, because Omeka is one you still have to FTP or you can use File Manager for plugins and themes. But like, I could see if you're having students use it, you might want to pre-populate some of that
Totally.
stuff, and it's ready and it's up and running with whatever plugin or theme you want them to use.
Yeah, I sometimes get writer's block, or just, it's hard to get started. And I really wish I would have had a SPLOT or something when I was unpacking these applications for the first time.
Yeah.
Just because it's a much quicker entry point, I think.
And actually it links again to a session that we'll be having tomorrow. And I know Ed Beck has talked a little bit about like, what does that mean for like premium plugins and premium themes? And that's a good question. I mean, I think every premium plugin has maybe a different kind of licensing around how you share. We do have access to Gravity Forms that does allow us to maybe build tools or templates on top of it, right? Because it does a lot of what the custom coding Alan Levine was doing with these, True Collector and True Writer. And so tomorrow, Tom will highlight a bunch of the different tools he has created using Gravity Forms that in many ways beautifully kind of dovetail with our discussions around site templates, splots, and making these things easier for folks to get involved in and add content or build site projects or class projects or, whatever it is, research-centered projects. I do think Gravity Forms, I think we were talking with Mo, and Mo was like, I don't really I'm trying to get my head around Gravity Forms. And I think you hear form and then you're like, oh, it's a form. But what you don't realize is that's actually a way to create a dynamic website with, a series of very powerful tools to make it easy for folks to contribute to that site and show it in powerful ways. So it is a form, but I think forms, you forget, drive what we do when we post anything on the web. So very kind of cool to think about that. And I think this will dovetail nicely with Tom's session tomorrow on Gravity Forms. So stay tuned for Domains 201 as well.
Totally. And again, while you were talking, Jim, I just installed the templated version of Omeka as an archive. And for anybody that was watching a little closely, you might have seen that error at one point. That's actually because I'm working in a StateU demo server, and we limit all cPanel accounts to no more than 3 installs. So because I had 3 and I tried to install a 4th, it gave me that error. That's not something that you should see in your own cPanels unless, of course, you have those similar limitations.
And we do have a question from Tierney, and I am going to bring it up.
Perfect.
And thank you for the question, Tierney. I'm going to add it right now. But here it is. And I'm going to...
Drum roll, please.
Yes. So Tierney's noting that they currently use templates for standard installs of most used applications. Definitely looks like there's a lot of value in creating templates for more specific use cases. And so they're curious about how, and I guess I cut that part off.
I think the banner does cap at a certain character limit.
So basically, institutions find themselves using regularly. Is it for classes, portfolio templates, etc.? How are they using templates?
Sorry
about that, Tierney.
Yeah, and I think we've gotten the question. One of the natural questions that comes from these types of conversations is, wow, it would be nice to not recreate the wheel and to be able to share these templates amongst servers. I do have a guide up on sharing splots between servers. It's in order to do that, though, you need root access to both servers. So it's something that Reclaim Hosting can help with, given 2 domains, schools would not have root access to both of their servers. The other thing you have to consider, too, is these are templates on a single WHM instance, meaning if you are a larger domain of one's own school and you have more than one server, you do have to template them on each server. Again, something we can assist with.
But that's a case where they would have root access to both servers.
Exactly.
So we can either help with it, or if they want to do that themselves, they could.
Yeah. And then in terms of sharing site templates amongst institutions, I think that's a great idea. It's hard it's cool in theory, hard in following through with that, because it is manual to move site templates from one server to the other. That said, I think there's probably an opportunity for us to have maybe a true collector SPLOT, for instance, which allows people to submit site template example sites
Exactly.
and keep sort of a repository of different site templates out there. So an admin that could then come to us and say, hey, Reclaim, I'm seeing this example online from an admin who gave permission for it to be there and be used. Can you put that on my server?
Great
In which
idea.
case we could say, yeah. So I think that's probably a to-do list item that could come from this workshop.
And also good, it's a good kind of feature of Reclaim Ed Tech is, are you using, to your point, Tierney, what are people using? How are they using it? And can we collect some of that? Because I think people are, but we're not capturing it, and we can.
And I think that, not only directly sharing in that way where we could drop templates on servers between, but even just what is your cookbook of WordPress plugins, right? Like this has come up multiple times also in the context of themes, in community chats and plugins as well. And, I think even, I've heard that multiple schools have is like a podcasting site template. And I'm always curious there's a few WordPress podcasting plugins, and I've used I don't know. I think it's like Simply Podcast. I don't really remember the name of the one I've used, but there's a few of them, and so I'm always curious to see which one are people liking, because in many cases, that's all you really need to know is, okay, I am familiar with WordPress, but what have people run into? What is the first place to start with some of that stuff is super helpful. The other thing I will mention that, and I'm mentioning this as sort of a word of caution, is you also could use like something like Updraft Plus or all-in-one migration, WP migration, to make like a backup and keep that file. And I know that Alan has used that method to distribute some splots before they were like available on Reclaim servers, and that's good. But I just want to be, because I'm sure people will think of that, is my point. And you can totally do that, but you have to be extremely careful about what's in there, because in those cases, that's a complete copy of the WordPress site, including admin credentials and email addresses and user profile information. Exactly. So you really don't want to throw that just out on the open web without being careful and very diligent on making sure that there's absolutely nothing in that backup that is not okay to be public information. So
good point.
I'm mostly saying that as to more because I'm positive the types of admins that work with domain of one's own will think of that, and some will try. It's something that I did when I was an admin, and I put it out there and was immediately like, oh man, there's like 4 email addresses in there of people that I don't want to dox them.
The other thing too, those migration plugins will do a lot of the work, but some of those like configuration settings don't always transfer over the same way, and so it is tough. But again, we can help with some of the moving, the heavy lifting between servers. I think there's been some cool ideas coming out of the session. I do know that we are wrapping up soon, and we're going to transition in this window. So if there's
I do have one last point, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that came up with SPLOT, or True Writer, True Collector, which are 2 tools that I think just kind of lend themselves to usage in higher ed very quickly, and I applaud Alan for seeing that and building them, is John Stewart of University of Oklahoma was noting that one of the cool things that would be a nice element to Reclaim Ed Tech, or just in general for the educational technologists more broadly doing some of this stuff, is kind of like a bio page where maybe there's a discussion with folks around, people who are in the field around what they're doing and how they're doing it. But then they willingly put a bio of their work and what they're good at. And whether it's private or public, or we control that, having people where they kind of use a site like that to highlight their interests, what they do, what they're good at. And then also talk a bit about what are they doing in ed tech? How'd they come into the field? Like, what are people's stories? And he taught it almost like, biography, of ed tech, folks in the field, folks starting in the field, just so that other folks who are coming into ed tech have a sense of how people got here.
And I know that this I don't see Discord as a full replacement for something like that, because obviously I think you need different mediums for telling your story beyond a
Yeah.
tweet length bio as in your
Exactly.
Discord profile. But I like that Discord could hopefully become a helpful space like that over time too, just naturally.
Yeah, or even using that as a way to collect people and get their stories and then put it in the site.
Right.
That might be accessible for folks, to see who's doing what and where they're doing and connect them.
Totally.
And because that template idea reminds me of that. Like, what are people building and how are we knowing what they're doing and the cool things they're creating, and allowing us to kind of not only hear their story, but then see the work, what the work they're working on would be super, super cool. Anyway, there's a lot of possibilities, I think, within True Collector or True Writer, or just sites that basically allow other folks to contribute easily, with very little hassle. And I like a lot of the big push behind the Splots, which I really loved, was you could reclaim some anonymity.
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
didn't have to be known through your email. Like, you could decide, I don't want to. And that could be always, anonymity is a double-edged sword. But for these students in British Columbia, I think it was a good thing. So,
Absolutely. Well, do I have permission to
yes.
transition now?
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, if you've got site template examples, or if you start working on one in the next little bit, please keep that in your back pocket for
Or
tomorrow
wish
morning.
list. I
Yeah.
wish if you've got an idea for a site template that you wish exists, I would love to hear about that too.
Yeah, so tomorrow we'll be doing a show and tell, and so we'd love to see some of those examples, because we know they're out there, and there's no way that we could see all of them or know all of them. So I'm looking forward to that tomorrow. As we switch gears for the rest of the day and wrap up and do some last minute Q&A, I think we're going to stay in this session. We're just going to maybe have a 2-minute countdown, and then we'll be back here in a second. See you then.
This is how the Italian. of the last 5 hours or so. A, how you doing? And B, do you have any questions?
They cannot hear us.
And C, can you hear us?
We were muted for the break.
Oh,
Okay. Well,
Okay, it's all good now. All right, so take 2.
sorry about that.
Welcome. Thanks for joining.
yeah, what did we say?
Nothing important.
Okay.
We're just saying it's the last little bit of the day, right? So we're kind of wrapping up questions. Break time banners going. We have lost.
It's
nothing important.
we're still fully in break mode, I think.
I think I got distracted from the dance break. I turned it off. But yeah, wow, we had the break banner. Thanks everyone for having our back.
Yeah, Doug's like, it's good now. Amateurs. Em's like, yeah, the banner's gone. Yeah,
Let's consider this a learning experience for tomorrow.
Yeah, we have maybe it looked like we knew what we were doing here, but in case you thought we did
so good all day.
Yeah.
And the final hurdle.
Yeah. I couldn't even have unmuted us. So that's where I'm at in this technical layering. So anyway, now that you can hear us, we would love to know relevancy. That's the next time I'm hearing about. Anyway.
Yeah, Tom was using
that's right. But we'd love to hear if you have any questions, any things that we didn't cover that you were like, hey, you got a couple of minutes. Can we talk about that? I know one that we mentioned and didn't dive into, but if we have a couple of minutes, I wouldn't mind is, how do you add X amount of users to a cPanel account? So more than one person can access cPanel. That's a potential one we can look at. That's useful. But I want to hear, more importantly, questions from you, because if you don't ask them, we'll fill a void with my boring cPanel example. Right? You don't have to say right to that. You have to agree.
Or even just goals for tomorrow. So if you thought today was going to cover something that we didn't, and you're like, wow, I really want to make sure we have time for that tomorrow.
Yes.
That would be helpful to know as well.
Right. Well, I'm going to bring up that cPanel example just because
Perfect.
that's one I can speak to.
Monica said, just saw WordPress released 6.0. Do you know anything about this update?
I heard that it was released recently.
Yeah, it's a good point though about application updates, because that's actually not something that Reclaim Hosting manages. We are at the mercy of Installatron's timelines for pushing out those updates. So once the application releases an update, it then goes to Installatron to test that update with their installer. Once they go through their testing, they release the update to us. So it usually is a little bit behind that initial release, but it's something that we're tracking. And if you ever want the most up-to-date knowledge on those timelines, you can always reach out to us. And we'll also be putting that kind of information in our monthly newsletter called Reclaim Roundup.
It looks like WordPress 6.0 was released for the public today.
Yeah, so that means Installatron will be
Getting
it soon.
Yeah, and we always know when Installatron is doing those updates, because servers can slow down given the amount of the load of actually just dealing with,
Yeah, because
if you have automatic updates turned on, Installatron will automatically update every site with that setting. And sometimes it tries to do it all at once.
Yeah, and so you get hundreds of application installers trying to update on the server, and it can weigh things down a little bit. So usually around those times, our infrastructure team is monitoring things pretty closely.
And it's a tricky compromise, right? Because in Installatron, you actually can tell Installatron to limit the amount of tasks per user and per server. But if you set that limit low, then what happens is the site is just kind of slow for days instead of a little bit more slow, but for a short amount of time. So it's a really weird thing to manage.
So, okay, let me go here and find my other window so I can see where I can share this. Great. So I'm going to share this, and then you all can help me. You can take me through my process,
Sounds good.
because I'm sure it's imperfect. So one of the questions that came up was, how do I in WHMCS add more than one account to a single cPanel instance? So the idea is, can you have different users both access cPanel from their respective accounts? When they log in, they still have access to cPanel. And the answer is yes, you can. And how to do that is you would actually, so here's my cPanel or WHMCS instance in State U we've been using, ilovedomains.stateu.org. And this is my account. If I wanted someone else to be able to add themselves so that they can log into this account, and I could think of an example, or you would basically essentially add a new order for that user.
But you'd be in the client
Other
profile.
users' client profile. So
Exactly.
let's pretend, do you have one? I could go and see if I could do it.
I'm sure I have
Let's
an
just see.
account. I've probably terminated different profiles and things. Yeah, there you
Okay.
go. So you have
There we
to,
go.
click on my name there.
Gotcha. This is the new.
I know.
I'm not used to the new WHMCS. I'll be clear here. I click where? Here? Yeah, there you go.
Click the client name. Exactly.
Yep. So here we are. And so I can add a new order here for Lauren, and I can make the service be, a State U domain, or, I guess we'll do that. And we'll do it I love domains.
And this is a good
stateu.org. Now notice I'm just adding the same account,
right.
right?
This is a good point to acknowledge that this is not a domain registration, even though you
No.
are technically giving someone access to a domain. It's a product or service for WHMCS.
Exactly. So if I submit this now, right, this will create a new username.
You're going to want to uncheck that create module, because that would essentially recreate the account.
Exactly.
And since we don't want to recreate it, we just want to give access to someone else, you really don't need that.
Yeah. So we can just accept the order. Beautiful. And then if we go here, when you log in to your account, and I might be able to do this under your products and services, right? You'll notice that there is one I love domains.stateu under Lauren's account. And there is a way to log into cPanel. And I don't know if that will happen here, but I think we need to change the username and the password to match the one for Jim Groom.
Yeah, I would click change password. That's true. Yeah, I think
so. I do have to do that.
The credentials are going to be the same.
Great.
And it's also worth noting, while Jim's kind of doing this, that this is our workaround because cPanel doesn't let us do it. So
it's true.
There are some things, like if you're both logged into the same cPanel at the same time in admin roles, you might not be able to access the same page at the same time. Like some of that simultaneous work can be a bit quirky with this. So just keep that in mind, that this really is a workaround. And for the most part, it accomplishes what we need it to do. But it's just what we have to work with, given cPanel is just unresponsive for this request that we have.
They will not let you have multiple admins.
I think it goes against their entire pricing model.
It does, exactly.
Yeah.
So I actually found it. I'm going to put in the right password. I'm going to put in the right username.
We have a question from Mo in the chat while you're doing that.
Perfect.
Yeah, I was going to say, if multiple people have access to a single cPanel, can they all use single sign-on to get that cPanel? That is correct. That's what we're doing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So these client profiles that we're working in are associated with someone's single sign-on credentials. So when the next time they log in with their credentials, they will see the cPanel. And if they don't, something's broken and we can help you fix that.
And we can look at this after that, but I changed the username and password to be the same as the original account in Lauren's account. So the one in mine has the same username and password, the same domain. I'm going to now sync the account by clicking change password. It will say change successfully.
Boom. And
then when I go into State U, I should be able to mask as Lauren or myself and see well, Lauren would see more than one account that she can basically drop. There's a drop down where you
We
could
should
go.
show
That's actually
that,
good. Go mask into Lauren and show that off as well.
will.
You'd want to see if I have 2 products in my WHMCS profile.
Let's check.
I think like if you go
And
to
you don't.
summary-
You only have one.
So it's just going to show that cPanel account. If while we're here, we wanted to give Lauren access to a second cPanel, you could create add new order, just like what we did, and create a fresh cPanel account for the user. And that's how we go about giving someone access to a second cPanel. It is manual, and that we're doing this now. And that's just so an end user can't do this on their, by themselves. You can also uncheck those boxes above, Jim, for order confirmation, generate invoice, all that stuff.
Yes. And then submit.
Submit.
And then this should allow us to, I will do the run create
That's
and
right.
send welcome email and then accept order. And now the big moment of truth, which I always love doing this live to see if, it doesn't work.
Because I was going to say on the demo server, I'm wondering if we have that
The
code.
CSS.
We probably don't,
Yeah.
honestly.
We might. The demo
I do have
server's
a
up to
working
date with
demo
some
up.
stuff.
That of the cPanel account switcher that I was going to pull up from my time at SNC.
That's a good example.
If you want me to show that,
Yeah.
it's
I think it's worth.
also a little bit imperfect because I'm realizing I
let's
did a
try
bunch
it on
of.
the demo site and just
Oh,
just
for
in
sure,
case.
we're gonna try it. Yeah,
That's right.
The demo site is up to date with at least some things.
well, it's up to date, but there's some custom code that makes that switcher work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Some
I mean,
custom
I think I
CSS,
was
we'll
wondering if it was
see.
up to date with that.
You can see all my
All right.
tester accounts.
Is it this one that we added it to?
It's one of the Brumfield ones.
Okay. Let's see. It worked.
Yeah.
Look at
Woohoo.
this.
There you
and,
go.
and the things there.
So, and it was a lot to get there, but the I Love Domains and Lauren Loves Domains, they're both here. And you'll notice we're defaulting to I Love Domains, and that might be because it's on top.
It's
but
because it
you
was
can
made
actually
first.
go here and you can get into the other one. It's
Exactly
pretty,
right.
it's a nice,
Uh,
Tim figured it out, and it's a nice workaround. You can
It-
see you have to make sure the sites share the same username and password. But when they do, and that's synced, you can have more than one user access cPanel. And one of the things
And
that
we
this-
do have it documented too, right?
do.
So as well as this video, of course, that right now we do have a. I linked it earlier in a session, and
multiple cPanels.
And a
multiple-
use
something like
case
that.
for this would be nice is say a student group. One student leaves, you want to seamlessly have another student be able to access it, or several faculty, or maybe co-teaching a course that's in
Mhm.
cPanel. You don't want to reproduce the cPanel, but they both want access. Like there's several use cases where this is valuable. So there is documentation that will be clearer than my fumbling around, but at the same time, hopefully this at least conceptually makes sense for the work that we were talking about.
I also
I'll
kind of want to
also
mention
note-
too that you do want to be from your perspective, you want to be a little bit thoughtful and maybe critical of what you set this up for. Just because you have to go through that process of creating the order and syncing the usernames and all that stuff, don't do this for a student org and then do it 30 times for every student in the org.
Yeah.
Don't sign yourself up for that work when all they probably need in that situation is for maybe their faculty advisor to own the cPanel,
Yes.
and then they can all have WordPress credentials that they all can manage,
That's
right,
a
for
good-
the application.
That's a good point,
That's
because we
neater.
are tracking the number of cPanel accounts
Yes.
that use, on the server. So if one user has 5 cPanel accounts, that's not one account, that's
It's
5
5.
accounts. So something to keep in mind as you're just managing numbers. Even
It's especially important because that's not an arbitrary metric that we're tracking, by the way. Like they take up storage and bandwidth and all that stuff is the resources on your server that's directly correlated. So you don't want to, there are times where this is great to do, but you don't want to get in the business of having to do this like 30 times for a student org or something else that's going to make your life miserable as an admin. So,
But I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but doesn't it mean that more than one person access the same cPanel account? So you're not creating duplicate cPanel accounts?
So for that workflow, yes, if you have 3 people looking at one cPanel, that's one on
Yeah.
our end.
Yeah.
But I think what we were saying is if you've got one person managing multiple cPanel accounts with that cPanel drop down, that's
Gotcha.
where
Mhm.
you know
It's
you'd
not
have to.
one
We're counting
person.
cPanel accounts, not
Mhm.
users.
So they shouldn't do each site as a separate cPanel.
That's exactly right.
necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. That's good. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that, but I'm being empathetic to the other folks who may not understand.
Mhm.
And I think we've
Absolutely.
got maybe 3-ish more minutes if there are any other questions, and if not,
I'll hop in while we're waiting for other questions and just say that, Jim, earlier you said you weren't sure how it decided which one to default to.
Yeah.
It defaults to the one that was created earliest in the system.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if it was alphabetical or earliest, but that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes the WHMCS will model it for domains alphabetically. So
Yeah.
products, I don't know. The other thing is tomorrow, keep an eye out for a couple of sessions on more intense deprovisioning, a deep look into using Gravity Forms for creating, custom applications, templates, kind of Splot-like things, but more DIY Splots. We'll also be talking to a couple of folks who've been playing with Reclaim Cloud and talking about why use the cloud. In what case would it make sense to say, okay, this is great for domain of one's own, but this particular instance needs to go in the cloud, and why? So we'll be digging in on that and more. So we really do look forward to seeing you all tomorrow for domains 201 as the saga
Yeah.
continues.
thanks everyone for joining today. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
See you then.
Bye-bye, everyone.